Hey all, and welcome back to another episode of There's Danger Here. I'm Leilani, and today we are going to be talking about a case out of California. So let's just jump right into it, shall we? On Monday, January 29th, 1979, in San Carlos, California, parents began dropping off their children at Cleveland Elementary School. A little after 8 a.m., Brenda Spencer looked across the street at the growing numbers of children, took aim, and fired. In her hands was a .22 rifle, specifically a 10-22 Ruger with a telescope. Because of the caliber, most people involved reported thinking it was firecrackers when the incident began. First to be hit was 9-year-old Monica Selvig. She was shot in her left side, thrown to the ground of the school's main walkway. Next, 8-year-old Mary Clark was shot on the left side of her stomach. She too fell, but got up and continued into school and was moved to safety with the other students. 8-year-old Greg Werner was shot next, striking his pelvic bone and falling to the ground. 10-year-old Crystal Hardy heard noises and turned, resulting in her being shot in the wrist. Crystal was taken in the nurse's office and tended to. Then, 7-year-old Audrey Stites was hit in the right elbow. Older sister Madeline Stites was next intended target, but the bullet aimed for her went through her jacket and was stopped by the binder and pencil case she carried with her. Principal Burton Ragg and another teacher, Darrell Barnes, were in the main office having coffee when they noticed 2 children down and the shots being fired. They ran out for the children. Burton led the charge, and for it was shot twice in the chest. He was the first fatality. Darrell made it to the children, picked them up, and carried them to safety. After taking them to the nurse, Darrell went to the school secretary, Mary Smith, having her call the police. The custodian, Michael Sukar, ran to Burton, but he, too, was shot. He fell into the shrubbery and bushes that lined the walkway. All the while, children continued to be dropped off and walk up this walkway to school. Again, everybody thought it was just firecrackers going off. In other areas, school was still getting ready to begin. Teachers were alerted to what was occurring by others. One teacher herded her class in, shut and locked the door, drew the blinds, and had the children stay away from windows. Then, amidst this chaos already unfolding, the fire alarm went off, resulting in many of the students stopping their walk inside to safety, waiting outside for an adult to tell them what to do. Wanda Carberry, another teacher, tried to use a whistle to attract the attention of the arriving children. 9-year-old Christy Buell was shot in the stomach and lower back, falling to the ground near the walkway, headed into school. This brave girl crawled up the walkway and managed to get to one of the external doors of a classroom. A teacher heard her and let her in. 10-year-old Julie Robles continued to walk up the entrance and was shot on the right side, knocking her glasses off her face. She immediately ran into the school. 9-year-old Charles A. Miller III, or Cam, was dropped off by his mother, and as he headed through the walkway, was shot in the left shoulder. In all the chaos, it wasn't until around 8:25 that police station received the first call. Of the first to arrive were Sam Cater, a veteran police officer, along with his field trainee rookie, Patty Bernathy, along with Larry Griffin and Sharon Amos. From the main San Diego department, officers Dennis Doremus and Robert Robb were dispatched with a police ambulance, as the city didn't have formal paramedics at this time. By the time they reached the scene, multiple officers were down along with the principal and again the custodian. When Robert got out of the ambulance, he noted that there was silence and guessed that the shooter was reloading, taking that time to check on the officers that were down. For his efforts, he was shot in the neck, but kept moving to help others. Next to arrive was Ted Kazanak. He stopped to put his vest on and could hear the gunfire. This is when he saw a trash collection truck, and he ended up commandeering it. He realized it was offered more protection at the entrance than the vehicles they had. Officers Blakely and Christensen used it as cover to move to the school while Kazanek drove the vehicle. He drove it all the way to the entrance of the school, where he basically jumped the curb and parked it, providing cover and concealment from the shooter. As they were working, Kazanek and Bernathy noted movement at the front door of the house directly across the street and realized they were likely seeing the shooter, radioing this information immediately to their station. This is when reporters started picking up the story. One reporter One reporter, Stephen Wygand, received the information from his office and was told to start calling across the street from the incident to see if they could get any information about it. He used a reverse directory and found the number for 6356 Lake Atlant Avenue, the house which was directly across the street. When he called, he was surprised to get an answer. The person who picked up the phone was Brenda. Steve asked if she knew who did it, and she replied that she saw everything as the shots were coming from 6356 Lake Atlant Avenue. And Steve definitely clarified. He said, "Isn't that your address?" And she said, quote, "Sure. Who do you think did it?" End quote. Then purportedly laughed and hung up on him. Steve did call back, and once again she answered, and at this time he asked to speak to an adult, but soon realized that it was Brenda he should speak with and asked if she'd be okay with answering a few of his questions. She agreed and reported she started shooting shortly before 8:30 a.m. She used her .22 caliber rifle that she received for Christmas, and that she told her dad that she was just too sick to go to school that day. She then stated, quote, "I just started shooting. That's it. I just did it for the fun of it," end quote. Also continuing on to say the line who most people remember if they know this case. She said, quote, "I just don't like Mondays. Do you like Mondays? I did this because it's a way to cheer up the day. Nobody likes Mondays," end quote. Now let's get in to Brenda a little bit. Brenda Spencer was the youngest of three to parents Dot and Wallace Spencer. While her parents were divorced, Brenda grew up with her father Wallace, who worked at San Diego State University. She was a bright student with great grades. She had been caught previously, however, for burglary and shoplifting, but there were no charges that ensued from this. So, back to the story. Steve's colleague ended up calling in after him, and Brenda answered his questions again. She stated she was shooting at random, but she liked the red and blue jackets. She also mentioned she shot at least one police officer. And while she talked with these men, police were able to complete some evacuations of the injured from the school and get some children to safety. Other children were barricaded in the school, laying on the floor while large objects were placed in the way of where the shooter would be able to fire from. Around 9:30 in the morning, SWAT arrived, filtering in, creating a command center about 3 blocks away from where the house was. Parents were showing up, attempting to get their children at the same time. They were trying to make sure they were okay, finding out that this, event was occurring, requiring police to set up safe perimeters. Then, after determining that everyone in the school was safe, they ended up widening the perimeter to try and really ensure the safety of everybody. Around the same time, they evacuated Brenda's neighbors. Brenda's parents were called in and they were brought into the command center. And it sounds like here, Wallace came pretty quickly while her mother had to be convinced to go. She stated that she couldn't do it at first until the police came and got her. It took until 12:06 p.m. for Brenda to answer the phone with police. The first negotiator was Detective Olson. He talked about getting her Burger King once she decided to give up and they got to the police station. After a while, she noted that she knew SWAT was outside and they were starting to irritate her, and she could shoot at them if she wanted to. As a result, SWAT was pulled back out of the line of sight. Detective Olson asked her several times why she decided to shoot at people. Brenda stated, quote, "I have no reason for doing anything. I just thought of it this morning," end quote. She also spoke about having fun, a sentiment she reiterated numerous times. 20 minutes into the call, police cut off electricity. Brenda continued to chat with the detective, talking about using dope and shoplifting before hanging up at about 1:40 p.m. She did pick up again 8 minutes later, and around 1:55 p.m., Brenda spoke about how much ammunition she had left. Father Wally confirmed she could have started with approximately 600 rounds. At 2:10 p.m., Detective Olson suggested Brenda surrender, and she said she'd think about it. And Olson said he'd give her time and he'd call her back in about 20 minutes. True to his word, Detective Olson called back, and the two started negotiations for Brenda's surrender. Finally, around 3 p.m., Brenda opened her door and walked out into the middle of the driveway carrying her rifle and her pellet gun. In the driveway, she laid down the guns and walked back inside to get back on the phone with Detective Olson. He then had her pick up the ammunition around the house, which she did within about 5 minutes and came back out with it in her arms. Once she set that in the driveway, she was arrested by 2 SWAT members that circled around behind her. The time was 3:06 p.m. Before getting arrested, Brenda managed to kill 2 adults, again the principal and the custodian, while 9 others, including several police officers and children, were injured. So let's back up to where this all began for a second. Like, way back. Dot Hobel and Wally Spencer married on December 12, 1954 in Chula Vista, California. Wally was 26 and Dot was 19. The family began expanding with the addition of a son Matthew in 1956 and a daughter Teresa in 1958. Lastly, Brenda was born April 3, 1962. According to a neighbor, Brenda grew into a, quote, spindly tomboy who was no bigger than a bar of soap, end quote. Dot stated Brenda was an active, happy child when she was younger, but when Brenda was 9, her parents divorced and the children all left to stay with their father. Okay, back to the timeline. 2 days after the shooting, on January 31st, 1979, the DA's office filed a petition charging Brenda with 2 counts of murder, 1 count of assault with a deadly weapon on a police officer, and 9 counts of assault with intent to commit murder. Due to the nature of the crimes, they also asked that Brenda be tried as an adult. The juvenile sentence maximum would be 7 years, while the adult maximum could be life without the possibility of parole. Since she was underage, it didn't matter if she was tried as an adult or not, the death penalty would be off the table. On August 17, 1979, Brenda and her lawyer put in a plea. Not guilty, by reason of insanity, as Brenda was going to be charged as an adult. Presiding Judge Byron McMillan informed Brenda that it meant the jury could find her insane and as a result, she'd spend the rest of her life in a state mental hospital. On the other hand, if she was found sane and guilty of first-degree murder, she could be sentenced to life in prison without parole. And with that, he ordered 2 psychiatrists to examine her. The trial was set for October 1st. By September, a total of 5 more psychologists had examined Brenda in order to determine her sanity. Dr. Ronald Markman was one of those psychologists brought in for the defense and concluded Brenda was legally insane. Then, on October 1st, Brenda changed her plea to guilty to the 2 counts of first-degree murder, as well as the counts of assault with a deadly weapon. In front of the judge, she reported, quote, I shot from my house and killed 2 people, end quote. For pleading guilty, Brenda received 25 years to life, allowing for the possibility of parole after serving 15 and a half years of her sentence. Prior to potentially going to an adult correctional facility, Judge McMillan ordered Brenda to undergo a 90-day diagnostic study by the California Youth Authority. A year later, Wallace remarried a woman named Sheila. Sheila was a former cellmate of Brenda while they were in juvie. When Sheila was released, she moved in with Wallace at 17, got pregnant, and that's what stemmed this marriage. After having a child together, Sheila just up and left. On April 4th, 1980, the now 18-year-old Brenda's sentence was confirmed after her preliminary study. While mother and father attended, Sheila did not. After official sentencing, McMillan stated the CYA concluded Brenda had mental issues stemming from troubles at home. Wallace was asked for his comment, but he wouldn't say anything. Brenda was sent back to CYA where she remained until early 1981. During that time, Wallace and Sheila regularly visited and even brought in her half-sister Bree. Brenda also graduated from high school at this time, but her time at CYA wasn't without incident. It is reported that she went to solitary on multiple occasions. Once, she attempted suicide by slitting her wrists with a broken coffee cup. In 1981, she received a disciplinary citation for setting her room on fire. As a result, at 19, she was transferred to the California Institute of Women's Prison at Frontera. And for reference, she was eligible to stay at CYA until 25. Wallace Spencer had visited her every Sunday since she transferred to prison, which was about 5 hours from his home. At this prison, Brenda attended Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous as soon as she arrived, but she couldn't complete the programs until around 1991. She also completed anger management courses and codependent anonymous programs. She's completed self-help and learning programs along with animal grooming, vocational electronics, hobby classes, and qualified as an electrical test technician. She earned her accreditation as a forklift driver and took upholstery and maintenance warehouse courses. She even managed to get her driver's license in order to work in the prison's auto shop. Eventually, Brenda became a tutor for the Project Read program, which helps other inmates learn to read. On January 21st, 1993, Brenda had her first parole hearing. She decided not to attend in person. Instead, she submitted a statement in which she took no actual responsibility for the shooting and basically blamed her life and drugs and how she was. In the end, it took the board 35 minutes to refuse her parole. The board commissioner, Jim Nielsen, remarked that her crimes were, quote, carried out in an especially heinous, atrocious, cruel, and callous manner, end quote. The board also believed she was still too big of a risk to society. On December 12, 1994, Brenda was back in front of the parole board. No family attended, but one uncle, Uncle Vern, wrote a letter in support of her parole. When asked if she was ready for parole, she stated, quote, obviously, no, end quote, especially when the parole said it would be important to have family involved and supportive in order for a successful parole. It took less than an hour to deny her parole once more, for a minimum of another approximately 5 years. However, she ended up scheduled for a parole hearing on January of 1998, but she withdrew at the door. Apparently, she was afraid to face her victims. This one was the then 27-year-old Cam Miller. In February of 2000, Brenda used a hot paper clip and scratched runes into her chest that purportedly meant, quote, unforgiven, end quote, and, quote, alone, end quote. In 2001, Brenda reported that she was sexually assaulted by Wallace, that the two shared a bed together, which Dot corroborates but states that they had minimal furniture when the two got divorced. She suspected that Wallace was abusing Brenda, but had no evidence. Dot stated that they would see each other weekly and Brenda would often spend weekends with her, though Brenda reported that the two barely saw each other while Brenda was young. On September 27, 2005, Brenda attended another parole hearing. This time, Wallace sent a letter of support for her parole. Cam Miller showed up again. At this hearing, she presented her information that she was abused by Wallace, making claims that this is why she was so disturbed. 15 minutes after Brenda's parole hearing, the verdict was back. She was to remain behind bars for at least another 4 years. Around the same time, Wallace finally did a single interview. It was shortly after this hearing, in which he stated that he bought the gun at Christmas because they would go up in the mountains and go shooting together. She didn't ask for it. That he was devastated by Brenda's actions upon finding out. Wallace, of course, denied allegations that he was an adulterer and that he got custody because he loved his children. He went to court to fight for them. Wallace was surprised to hear about the allegations of sexual abuse, and Wallace said he'd take a lie detector on it because he never did any of that he would sodomize her. He seemed pretty disgusted. Wallace said after the divorce they shared a bedroom but had separate beds. About Sheila, Wallace declined to speak about that situation. Kathy Ragg, Principal Burton's widow, was asked if she thought Brenda should have gotten the death penalty, to which she replied, quote, sure, it was a bad thing to do, but I think that's how I feel, or be incarcerated forever, if she must live, end quote. In 2007, Brenda was hospitalized for depression and had to meet with a psychotherapist, but I didn't see if this was the result of another suicide attempt. However, prisons don't usually send somebody to the hospital for something less than a medical emergency. In 2009, Brenda faced the parole board and was again denied. While victims showed up again, the family did not have any, and they didn't add any support letters this time. My guess is as a result of her claims that she was abused. And this time, Brenda expanded her abuse to not only Wallace, but her brother and sister. Again, in 2016, she returned to be in front of the parole board, and by this time, Wallace had unfortunately passed away, so there was zero family support of any kind. Again, she was denied, although the board did commend her for her good behavior recently. Adding another hearing should occur no later than September 2021. It appears her latest denial was in late of 2025. As of this time, she remains locked up in prison. Brenda had at least 6 denials, and she'll be eligible to meet in front of the parole board again in 2028. And as a weird aside, this is where the song I Don't Like Mondays by the Boomtown Rats came from, which came out in 1979. And for now, that is the end of the story of Brenda Spencer. But again, she's behind prison bars right now. She is going to be eligible for parole coming up in a couple years, and we'll see if she ever gets out for these heinous shootings that she decided to go to. And the last kind of note is she was actually touted as one of the first modern day school shooters, even though she didn't go into the school and complete the act. And with that, to all those out there listening, be careful. It's a dangerous world we live in.